Mrs. Ford, please go ahead with roll call.
Chairwoman Robinson,
Here.
Mrs. Black,
Here.
Mr. Connor,
Here.
Mr. Grome,
Here.
Mrs. Jones,
Here.
Mr. King,
Here.
Mr. Perez,
Here.
Mrs. Fay Robinson,
Here.
Mr. Smith,
Here.
Mrs. Sermon,
Here.
Dr. Wingate,
Here.
Superintendent Dr. Robertson.
Here.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
A motion from Mr. Perez. Do I have a second?
Second.
With the amendments.
With the, right. We're going to, do I have a motion to approve the agenda with the amendments that are called out on the memo before you? And Mrs. Ford, I believe that you have a copy of this, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. Do I have a
Second.
Second. Thank you.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And you call for the vote, please.
Mrs. Black,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Grome,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Perez,
Yes.
Mrs. Fay Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Sermon,
Yes.
Dr. Wingate,
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson.
Yes, I apologize. I think I made a mistake. Mr. Groen would like to add something to the agenda, a discussion item. And I instructed him to motion for it at the consent period, when we do the consent, and I think I made a mistake on that. It should have been for the overall agenda. Okay. We could, I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, we could either redo this vote, or we could just I could just simply say, hey, we're gonna have a discussion at the end.
Or you can do it two ways. You can
Okay.
say we're gonna have a discussion, or you can let him make a motion to amend the agenda.
That's fine.
It's just pleasure of the chair.
I'm just gonna go ahead and say we're gonna have a discussion at the end, and that way there doesn't have to be a vote for this topic. Mr. Groen, are you comfortable with that? We're just gonna go ahead and add the discussion. Okay, so we'll add a discussion just to after to our very last voting item, which is
Other board matters.
other board yeah, we'll just add it to other board matters is what I'm getting at. Okay, so Mr. Groen, discussion item. Okay. All right. Okay. We'll move on to the pledge and pledge of the flag and meditate. Oh, I'm sorry. Someone have something? No? Okay, great. We'll move on to pledge of the flag and meditation. Tonight we have Principal Stewart from Apison Elementary. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Chairwoman Robinson, school board members, Dr. Robertson, and senior leadership cabinet. Ayn Rand, a controversial best-selling author of objectivism, once wrote, "The ladder of success is best climbed by stepping on the rungs of opportunity." Daily, the school board addresses and delves deep into the recommendations of senior leadership to ensure success for Hamilton County schools. For there is a common goal to solidify the just cause by creating an environment where all students in Hamilton County schools thrive and experience a future without limits. And I welcome my assistant principals to join me.
This year, Hamilton County Schools stepped on the rungs of opportunity, giving each school the opportunity to utilize supplemental funding to hire additional faculty and staff to meet the academic, developmental, and social-emotional needs of all students. Success for individual schools will look different. Some will strive to increase the number of students reading on grade level. Others will strive to improve their graduation rates. Yet, while others will strive to get the right ones on the bus who will be invested in the community they serve. And still others will capitalize on social emotional well-being. Whatever the motivation, for this we are grateful.
In particular, Apison is a school in transition, one that has transitioned from rural to suburban. Growing in population in just over 10 years from about 350 students to just shy of 700, and growing with the numerous developments in our zone. We took the opportunity to select the right people who will be invested and who are committed to ensuring students thrive. Ayn Rand also states, "Happiness is that state of consciousness which proceeds from the achievement of one's values." So today we say that we are happy because we value investments in all students, investments that positively impact the academic, behavioral, and social-emotional well-being of students. We value those that bring happiness to children through acts of kindness and are caring about their circumstances and make a conscious effort to know the children. And today, we are happy to stand before you as a representative of the investments you daily make in the students of Hamilton County School for Appison. We are a return on your investment.
Finally, Houston Kraft, author of Deep Kindness and co-founder of Character Strong, states that an outcome is what we want to achieve or happen on purpose as a result of what we do. We cannot expect the desired outcome with a single ingredient or action. However, having all the ingredients that are included in a good recipe, or having all the right stakeholders working harmoniously together for a common goal, can produce the desired outcome. Hamilton County School Board, senior leadership, administrators, faculty, and staff have a common goal of creating an environment where all students thrive and experience a future without limits. This is one of the greatest acts of kindness. Thank you for allowing us to be with you tonight, and please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you. We'll move into our board member disclaimer statement. We'll start on the end with Mr. Groen.
Does not apply.
Thank you.
Okay, I declare that I have a relative who works for the school system, and if the board's vote on the budget and policies may have an effect on my relative's employment, even so, I hereby certify that I will cast my vote in the best interest of the school system.
I declare that I have a relative who works for the school system and that the board's vote on budgets, policies, etc. may have an effect on my relative's employment. Even so, I hereby certify that I will cast my vote in the best interest of the school system.
I declare that I have a relative who works for the school system and that the board's vote on budget, policies, etc. may have an effect on my relative's employment. Even so, I hereby certify that I will cast my vote in the best interest of the school system.
I declare that I have relatives who work for the school system and that the board's vote on all matters may have an effect on my relative's employment. Even so, I hereby certify that I will cast my vote in the best interest of the school system.
I declare that I have a family member who works for the school system and that the board's vote on budget, policies, and all things may have an effect on all my relatives' employment. Even so, I hereby certify that I will cast my vote in the best interest of the school system.
I declare that I have a family member who works for the school system and that the board's vote on all matters may have an effect on my relative's employment. Even so, I hereby certify that I will cast my vote in the best interest of the school system.
I declare that I have a relative who works for the school system and that the board's vote may have an effect on my relative's employment. Even so, I hereby certify that I will cast my vote in the best interest of the school system.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
I have a motion from Mr. Perez,
Second.
second from Mr. Connor. Are there items to pull?
Well, you have to,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead and call the vote.
yeah, you have to vote first.
No, right, we pull, right? Yeah.
Pulling that.
Yeah.
Like we're new
Yeah,
to
we
this
pull
every
them
week.
first. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought I heard somebody down there say,
Yeah.
that's not what you do. So then I was like, wait.
Yeah, I'm taking notes. Does anyone want to discuss anything?
Yeah, are there any items? Okay, Mrs.
Ever
Thurman.
since you
Yes.
shaved your beard, we're lost.
I was trying, sorry, I was trying to
You were
find-
not here last month, and we had an excellently ran meeting. Watch
I
the
will-
watch
I
it.
will-
Maybe it's a Marco malfunction.
I watched for 4 hours last time, so
And it
I
ran
think we're
great.
okay.
Well, until the end, yeah. But that doesn't count. Mrs. Thurman, please.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna pull, 6G2AH, the cell phone, use policy, please.
Thank you. Are there other items to pull? Okay. Okay, we'll call for the vote.
Mrs. Black?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Mrs. Faye Robinson?
For clarification, was that to pull, not?
No, it's for the rest of the stuff.
Okay, yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman?
Yes.
And Chairwoman Robinson.
Yes, thank you. Mrs. Thurman?
Yes, we discussed this some in our agenda session. The only thing I really have a problem with, even though some of this talk seems a little bit redundant, but the only thing I really have a problem with is the line 30. It says 30 and 30, end of 30 and all of 31. It says for grades 9 through 12, each individual school may choose to allow cell phones in designated areas during lunch. I think lunch is where the biggest problem happens with cell phones. And if it was up to me, this policy would be a whole lot, shorter. We could have done this in about half a page, I think. But I just say no cell phones at school, except for the technology piece here, even though I did have some teachers contact me and tell me unless it was for interpretation that they didn't see any need for technology at all. They said, we're ready to go back old school. We got a lot more done when we did it that way. With the pencil and paper, they said kids engaged a whole lot more when it was like that. So, but I say, I don't like that because I do not like one school having one policy and another school having another. I thought that's why we were doing this, is to make it uniform across the district. I just don't like that piece of this cell phone policy, and I cannot vote for it like this.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
I'd like to make a motion that we strike that last sentence that Ms. Thurman just referenced.
Could you read that sentence for me?
It will be the end of line 30, which starts for grades 9, and then line 31, 12. Each individual school may choose to allow cell phones in designated areas during lunch period. I would move that we strike that entire sentence.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion to remove line, or specifically the wording, for grades 9 through 12, each individual school may choose to allow cell phones in designated areas during lunch period. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Groen.
Okay.
Can we have, yep.
Yes, can we step back just one moment, please?
Yes.
Because I didn't flip the page over, and I did not get Mr. Wingate's vote on the consent agenda, and he knew that, but he was kind enough not to say anything. So,
Yes.
Dr. Wingate.
We had enough without him. We're
I
fine.
understand, but I just wanted to get it right. Okay, I apologize.
Okay, let's have discussion. Does anyone? Nobody's lit up their box, so. Mrs. Jones.
Okay, so if you strike, I'm sorry, you're wanting, for clarity, are you striking for grade starting at 4 and ending at period? Is that, you're striking that entire sentence?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you was just striking lunch period. I'm confused. I thought he was
No,
saying.
that entire sentence, for grades 9 through 12, each individual school may choose to allow cell phone in designated areas during lunch period. Strike that sentence as a motion.
So then it would just say the principal or his or her designee may grant a student permission to use a cell phone as a device to assist with instruction at his or her discretion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just want clarity on what was being striked.
Okay, are there any additional comments on this motion? Okay, let's call for the vote.
Mrs. Black,
No.
Mr. Connor,
No.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
No.
Mr. King,
No.
Mr. Perez,
No.
Mrs. Fay Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman,
Yes.
Dr. Wingate,
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson.
No.
Motion fails.
Okay, Mr. Connor.
So I know we've talked about this a bunch, so I'm going to try not to go through too much of what I've said before, but a saying came to me that is good for policy and good for politics, is that you're not always going to find the bus that takes you directly to your front door. Sometimes you need to just get on the bus and make sure you get to your own block. So I think that at the baseline, this gets us to the right block. I think it's hilarious that by having it quarterly reviewed, we are actually doing what we're supposed to do and reviewing it at the first quarter, since we started talking about this in April. And I am going to make a motion that we vote on the policy as is in front of us.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Connor and a second from Mr. Keen. Is there discussion?
I just want to say, yes,
Yes, go ahead, Ms.
I'll
Sturman.
take an Uber.
Okay.
You've got to use a cell phone to do that.
I mean, everybody's have the same.
You're gonna have to have a, that was so good.
We all thought
Oh,
the
that was
same.
Can't
so
write
good.
pencil and paper, doesn't get an Uber.
That's so good. That's so good. I will comment. I saw Brandon back there. He liked that quote. He liked that quote. Mrs. Black.
My only concern with the way that the policy is written now is for the schools, which we have several in several different districts, including mine, that have an environment where 6 through 12, grades 6 through 12 are together. And it's kind of an administrative nightmare to think about enforcing it and letting half the school have their cell phones at lunch and half the school not. I know Lookout Valley is in my district, and they have that kind of environment. But that's my only concern is how much of a headache that would cause administration.
Okay. Are there any additional comments? If not, let's go ahead and call for the vote.
Mrs. Black,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
I'm sorry, what we
the original as it was written.
As
Yes.
Main motion. Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Perez,
Yes.
Mrs. Fay Robinson,
No.
Mr. Smith,
No.
Mrs. Thurman,
No.
Dr. Wingate,
No.
Chairwoman Robinson.
Yes.
Question.
Yes, go ahead, Mrs. Jones.
So because we are reviewing this quarterly, we will, hold on. Calm down. Because we are reviewing this quarterly, this will give us time to assess how this goes this first, and then reevaluate. Okay. I will, well, the second, I mean, I'm talking about since school will be in, it'll give us time to do that. And I would like to say, being a kid that was at that school at all three levels, at a school with all three levels, there were some things that I didn't get to do that people like, he gonna be real mad at me when I say this, but the way Hintons of the world got to do, because they were in high school and I was in 8th grade, he was in 10th, okay, 11th. But I'm just saying, there were things that he got to do that I didn't get to do, because when we were at CSAS, I mean, there were definitions, even though we were in the same building, there were definitions of being in the middle, the lower, and the upper school.
Okay. Mr. Groen.
I made a mistake, Madam Chair, on that the vote we just
Okay.
took. I want my vote changed to no.
Okay. Mrs. Ford, are we able to note that? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
It still passes.
Still passes. 6-5. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Groen. Okay. Let's move to administrative business matters. First item is 7A1, update on differentiated pay. Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
Okay. Is there,
Who moved?
Mr. Smith moved, motioned, and Mr. Connor second.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion?
Uh,
Mrs. Thurman?
I like Gary, I'm glad that they cleared up the language there, so maybe everybody understands what's going on. Appreciate that.
Good. Great. Any more discussion? Mrs. Robinson?
Are we asking the teachers to sign that they have read and understand?
Yes, ma'am, they'll receive a, kind of a sign-on, it's just a very similar to the.
But they will acknowledge that they have received and received it?
Yes, ma'am, we have something.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We'll call for the vote, please.
Mrs. Black,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Groen,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Perez,
Yes.
Mrs. Fay Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman,
Yes.
Dr. Wingate,
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson.
Yes. Item 7A2, tenure reinstatement. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Connor, a second from Mr. Perez. Is there any discussion? Okay, call for the vote.
Mrs. Black,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Perez,
Yes.
Mrs. Fay Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman,
Yes.
Dr. Wingate,
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson.
Yes. Item 3, updated job classification, Director of Transportation. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Mrs. Jones, and a second from Mr. Smith. Is there any discussion? Okay, call for the vote.
Mrs. Black,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes, only because I get on his nerves all the time. I feel like he needs the title.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Perez,
Yes.
Mrs. Fay Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman,
Yes.
Dr. Wingate,
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson.
Yes. Okay, item 7B1, the Blue Cross Blue Shield Gateway Building Letter of Intent. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Smith and a second from Mr. Perez. Is there discussion?
Just,
Yes, go right ahead, Mrs. Jones.
I just want to make sure that we're going on record for saying that we're voting to pursue the building and that any decision made about what goes on in that building has to go through the school board for approval first. Okay, I just want to make sure the public understands that. Okay.
And I will say I appreciate both of you making that statement, so thank you. Okay, Mr. Perez.
I would just, speaking of buildings and things, encourage the board to have a facilities meeting, because I'm thinking of a couple other, like, I'm curious about what's happening with the Cigna building right now and things like that. So that's not, but like, there's a lot of facilities conversation that we've had, and I'd love to catch up on a lot of those different items.
So on behalf of the Facilities Committee as chair, I'm awaiting the Facilities Committee report that's supposed to be coming from the committee that Mayor Wamp and Dr. Robertson and Mrs. Robertson and several other people sit on, because there's a discussion going on there before I know what the discussion can be had here. So that's where I'm at.
So
with
maybe
it.
we
I'd
need
like
to
I'd like
put
to have
some
that
pressure
report.
on those people that are.
Well, they already got it from me, so.
Yeah, I'm feeling the heat
Um,
right now, feeling it. Mhm.
But,
I'll plan on also the next couple weeks circling around with everybody.
There's a lot of
An
stuff that's
update
been
on
hanging out
their
there.
facilities.
Yeah.
So we'll do that.
Yeah. Okay, is there any additional discussion on the Gateway Building LOI? Okay, we'll call for the vote.
Mrs. Black,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Perez,
Yes.
Mrs. Fay Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman,
Yes.
Dr. Wingate,
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson.
Yes. All right, item 7B2, Saudi Daisy partial property transfer. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Mrs. Thurman, a second from Mr. Smith. Is there discussion?
And I just wanted clarification. I know where the game field is, and then across from it, there was also a practice field. That practice field's not being touched either, right?
No.
Okay.
Okay, any additional discussion? No? Call for the vote, please.
Mrs. Black,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Perez,
Yes.
Mrs. Fay Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman.
Yes.
Dr. Wingate,
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson.
Yes. Item 7C1, the Orchard Non-Middle School Turnaround Plan. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, it's a motion from Mrs. Jones, a second from Mr. Connor. Is there discussion?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
How much longer do we have with this?
One more. 3 more years.
That's what I
Yeah,
thought.
it was 5 years. The first year was planning and then 4 years implementation.
Okay.
But this specific item, it does not come up annually, correct?
The approval of the committee is annual.
Okay. Okay, any additional discussion? Okay, please call for the vote.
Mrs. Black,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Perez,
Yes.
Mrs. Fay Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman,
Yes.
Dr. Wingate,
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson.
Yes. Okay, item 7D, the Thriving Kindergarten Toolkit is on the agenda, but it does not need a vote, according to Dr. Robertson. Okay. So we'll move on to 7E1, MOU between Hamilton County Schools and the Hamilton County Education Association. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Connor, a second, Mr. Keene. Is there a discussion? Mrs. Thurman?
Yes, I tell you, I just really don't feel comfortable with this because I don't think enough teachers have seen it. They may have some issues with that, and usually they contact us when they do. They give us a call and say, hey, you know, we don't like this part or that part. I haven't had a chance to talk to any teachers, or teachers haven't really had a chance to look at it yet, so I just don't feel comfortable with voting on this myself.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I would like to
Okay.
make a motion that we table it until, I mean, it has to,
Well,
we
we could do a special called session if you'd like. I mean, we could,
special call session or something. I hate to get everybody back out, but
Yeah.
like I say, I just would like to hear from the teachers.
go ahead.
The intent of trying to get it approved before school starts is to just reassure teachers that there is an MOU in place, right? So, you know, again, I apologize that it's coming late, you're right. Should have gotten it earlier, so.
And also,
so we'll-
Justin, I would like to have a red line copy too, just like because I don't know what's been taken out and what's been
What-
changed.
The hard part about a red line copy is it's not, I mean, it's coming from, it's really a fresh start. We can put one together, but it's not gonna be perfect, but we
Okay.
can get that to you. We could try to do a special call session before school starts, or we can push it to the the August meeting is the
17th.
So it's a week after teachers start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I second it, and I would suggest that we do a special call session next Thursday as part, you know, like, give us a week and people a week. But I agree with you, like, we got it today, and it's a 3-year MOU, right?
Say that, I'm sorry.
3 years, is that our
Yeah.
commitment? So we're voting on something that we haven't had a chance to really chew, and it's a 3-year commitment that we want to make. So.
Before we do, can we make sure we get a date of enough board members? Because I know that at least a couple will be out of town.
Okay. Absolutely. So, can we just kind of table the motion at the moment? Like, as in, like, come back to Rhonda's motion? Just for the sake of, like, talking about dates, is that okay? Okay.
Yes, let me just ask this, we haven't had an MOU for over a year now, right? I agree with Ms. Thurman. I would really like for our teachers, the masses, to be able to see this. And if we set, you know, a date here in the next week or two to vote on this, I would question if all the teachers are going to have seen it. And we hadn't had one for over a year. I would just wonder why we couldn't wait until our next meeting, and that's only 2 weeks after school has begun.
About a week.
Or even a week. And by that time, everybody can have read it and studied and ask questions about it. We hadn't had one for over a year. What's another 30 days gonna hurt?
That's true.
I hear you. I just want the board to be aware, like, there are teachers that this will, like, they're anxious about it. And so I think having an assurance from the board that it's gonna be voted on in August, that there seems to be widespread support for it. You just wanna get
That's right.
personal input
That's right.
from teachers. And we can try to work with, HCA and all the other organizations to get that out, so.
I think I'd like to, I mean, is it okay for me to ask Aaron?
Sure.
Aaron, do you mind to come to the podium?
And did the lady that was on the PECA board, did she leave?
She left, yeah.
Okay.
I was at the meetings though.
Yeah.
So.
So Aaron, I mean, HCA would have to help facilitate getting this out to teachers, to Mr. Smith's point. So at this point, what do you think that your membership, like, what do you think that they would feel if we decided to wait until our August 17th meeting?
I think they would be very distressed to start the school year without the MOU. You know, last year the vote was lost just by like 13 votes or something. So a lot of teachers were under a lot of stress for not having one this year. And I will add that the majority of eligible educators in the PECA poll not only voted for collaborative conferencing, but they also voted for HCEA to represent them. And, you know, the PECA law lays out this process. This is not collective bargaining. It doesn't go to the members to ratify. It's the board's sole job to ratify.
Yeah.
So
Much like our people that live in our district elected us to make decisions on their behalf, sounds like it's the same in your situation too.
that's how the PECA law is written.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
you know, the teachers, for example, had the opportunity to have other organizations participate in collaborative conferencing, and that did not occur.
Mhm.
So I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I think of all eligible educators, 56 or so % voted yes and HCEA, I think. And so we were the or HCEA was the duly elected representatives of the professional educators, which is why the cover page says it's not between the board and HCEA, it's between the board and professional educators as represented by HCEA.
Okay. That is helpful. Thank you. Mr. Wingate.
Yeah, I've been in education for 25 years. I've never been distressed about an MOU. Like, I don't know. I'm good with waiting another month. I mean, I'm not trying to be insensitive at all. I just don't understand what's so earth-shaking that could or could not take place in the next 30 days that's going to cause, I mean, as a biology teacher, what was going to change and cause me to be so verklempt that I couldn't teach my biology class because of an MOU. I mean, I understand the importance of the MOU, don't get me wrong. I understand the importance of contracts between professionals, but at the same time, I also understand opportunity to understand the contract. So we don't have to wait 30 days. I'm good to wait a week or 2 weeks or whatever, but I mean, I don't understand I don't understand what's going to be so upsetting about us not voting on that tonight. So that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. Mrs. Jones.
So, Aaron, can you come back? Huh? You might. Your
Sure.
circles are gonna close today. This is a question for both you and Dr. Robertson,
Mhm.
considering you already there. With the teachers that were present in the collaborative conferencing, was angst expressed there by not having coverage last year? Or, I'm just trying to get a feel for it, and I know
By not having it last year.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and the reason why I'm saying that is because I hear my colleagues on the panel. I have never been a part of a union or been a member of a union per se.
Not a union.
That's not a union, it's association.
Association,
Oh, yes, it is.
a professional organization that could support me locally, I should say, okay? Okay. Peer support at an organized level. However, in working in my career, my current role, and having family members that had associations and things that would represent them, and in lieu of the climate of education and public education at this time, I hear what Ms. Dr. Wingate is saying. But I also hear teachers that are currently in our buildings and in other districts across the country. And I know people that have striked from LA to Chicago. I mean, I had friends that striked in Chicago several times. And so I don't ever want that to become the case here. And I know the climate of public education is changing. So I am in support of if we want to defer it like a week out, but I do see the rationale for having this in place before August the 9th. I really do. I just do.
In all honesty, I'll interrupt. It actually would be good to, if possible, to have done before in-service, because then some of that
So when is
time
in-service?
starts on the 3rd, right?
I
So
mean, I
having
just-
the opportunity during those in-service days to go over it with educators, and that's what our ARs are going to be doing, is going over the important MOU
Because I think maybe just a
provisions.
week out. I mean, I don't know. I don't really want to come back in a week, but I would to give, so they would have something. I'm okay with the week out. I'll just go ahead and say, no, I'm not gonna support a vote for, and I'm just one vote though, but I'm not gonna support a vote for August the 17th. Cause I won't be here and I wanna vote. It's my anniversary weekend, okay? But yeah, I won't be here and I would like to vote for this.
Thank you. Mrs. Thurman?
Yes, the motion that's on the, did that have a, can we add a time to that, or do I need to amend the motion that we,
I think we set a
table
date
this?
with your, I think if you will set a date with your motion,
Okay.
I think that solves the issue.
Okay, I'd say we just postpone it. I'm with Joe, if they haven't had one for a year or more, that, I mean, I don't have a problem with the MOU. I don't think anybody has a problem. I just want to be courteous to the teachers who haven't had a chance to look at it yet. It's not about me, it's about them. It's not going to affect me one way or the other. Like I say, if it's okay with them, and but sometimes they read things and they'll say, hey, I don't like this. I think you need to look at this, or you need to change this, or something like that. Like I say, I'm just not comfortable with voting on something that just was laid on my desk, right before the meeting. I haven't even had a chance to look at it. I say you just put it off till the next school board meeting.
Can I make a quick just suggestion, or raise your hand if you're going to be in town before, if you'll be in town between now and August 4th. Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so you would only have 6 people that are here if we actually had tried to have a special session. I mean, I agree with you. I'm on the exact same page as you, but the problem is that we would only have 6 people in town, I think I counted. So I don't really know how we even solve this if we don't. I would actually say maybe we just decide to vote on this tonight, and if it doesn't pass tonight, we bump it to the August.
I would rather it not look like we didn't pass.
Okay, that's fine. Well, then we can table it to that's fine.
And I point out, you have a motion to table
Right.
on the table.
Just to August.
So- and
Yeah.
so, that's
So
the
wait,
correct
you
word.
need to just go ahead and plan to put it, say the August meeting, Rhonda.
Okay, yeah, the August is 17th. Yes, just put it off to vote to then.
Second.
Well, we already had a second for
Okay.
Mr. Perez.
Had a second to the table. I believe we need to do it sooner, but,
I don't know how you do.
So change that to Mr. Smith.
so yeah.
Okay. Okay, I do have other people lined up to make comments. Do you still want to make comments? If you don't, just clear your screen. Okay, Mr. Connor.
So just to be clear, we're going to ask the teachers to weigh in on this, is what we're looking for, and they're going to give their opinion to the people that they've already designated to be their people talking about this, that have already come and passed.
No, or they can call us. Sometimes they call us.
I'm just, but I understand. I'm just making. I want to be for clarity. All of these opinions would come to us, and we would voice them. But then at the end of the day, it would go back to the group that they've designated to negotiate for them with the school system. So it would be the exact same people making the same process.
And we could take into consideration recommendations
Okay.
that come from other teachers.
Okay, Mrs. Black.
I just want to reiterate that I see the value of providing our teachers with the peace of mind of having an MOU in place. I don't know, if it were me as a worker, I would want to know the bounds of my contract, and working without that. I can imagine that it was very stressful last year, and I would like to have that in place for our educators.
Thank you. Mr. Perez.
So, kind of to the comment, Ms. Thurman said it, like, I don't think we're gonna come here and radically change the MOU. I think there's process, and I'm not blaming anybody. I'm very grateful for all the work that was put into this, but it came to us at this moment. We haven't had a chance to see it, and it's a 3-year commitment. I think, as far as peace of mind, I think teachers can fairly rest that we had a whole process and we trust the process. The item on the table right now is something we as a board have not had an opportunity, and it's a 3-year MOU. I would have been in favor, and I understand we don't have time to just table it for a week and come back and do it. But if we can't get the board together to vote on it and pass it, which is why I don't want to do something now if board members are in agreement. The last thing I want to tell teachers is, yeah, we don't agree with this. I want to say, we received it today in the afternoon. I'm not blaming anybody for the process. We've heard a couple items that we even had to remove because the state legislature is in the middle of the discussion. And in my opinion, I mean, teachers have a contract that they are coming under, that we are protecting them by law. So it's not that you're coming in and nobody knows what you're going to do tomorrow. We do have contracts. Ideally, what I would recommend to the school system in general is we can try to function under the MOU for the 1 or 2 weeks. I mean, this is what we think the board is going to approve. Simply, if it ends up waiting till August, we don't have a place. But in all good faith, there's no reason it's going to change. It was delivered to us, a 3-year contract this afternoon. I'm not blaming anybody. I have trouble voting for a 3-year contract that I haven't had the chance to understand. So that's the only issue.
Thank you. Mrs. Thurman.
Yes, a lot of people need to understand, I don't know what percentage of the teachers are members of the HCEA, but it's not a majority. So there's more that are not a member of the HCEA than are a member of the HCEA. So, I just want to be sure all teachers get to look at it, because like I say, it's not between us and the HCEA, it's between us and the teachers. And they just happen to be the ones that would be just like us making a vote, not asking any of our constituents how we felt about it. I mean, we're here to represent our districts, but we listen to the people that are in our district, and they have to listen to the teachers that are not members of the HCEA, just like they do the ones that are in. So I'm just, like I say, I will not vote for it either way, if we vote for it. So, but that's my motion, to table it until the 17th, because it's hard enough to get people here for a board meeting once a month. So, I'm like Tiffany, I just don't know how many people are even going to be in town. I'm not sure if I'm going to be here or not. So,
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Connor.
Sorry, Marco's comment gave me an idea, and I don't know if it's possible, Scott. Could we, is there a way that we could pass this to work under it with a forthcoming finalized vote? So could we vote to use
MOU
this?
pro tempore?
Yeah, could we vote to work under this business model until it is formally approved at the next meeting?
So I would respectfully suggest that that's not necessary, for the simple reason that we have a grievance policy in board policy. We have a number of things that have been put into the MOU that came from board policy, with some changes. Obviously, the teachers have offered some input. So if what you're asking is, will the administration continue to operate basically as proposed in the MOU, well, your policies already basically laid that out. There's some changes, and there's some ways where the teachers have expressed their concern on certain things like working conditions, and I'm not minimizing that at all. I'm simply answering your question. Can you enact something that will effectively govern the administration's operation for the next 30 days? I would say you have. It's your board policy.
Dr. Robertson.
I mean, essentially echoing what Scott said, we will operationally move forward as if this was approved. Really, the only thing that will change, we won't print thousands of copies, right? I don't know, Scott, if this is a possibility. There's a motion on the floor. I mean, to take this off the board, like we could just pull this and bring it back in August. I don't know what the proper procedure is, though, if that's helpful.
Table with the second, it's been debated. It would be up to the board. The person who made the motion, the person who seconded the motion, if they wanted to strike it, the result's the same.
Right.
The result's the same.
So I call for question.
Mr. Keene has comments first. Mr. Keene?
Well, I was just going to say, there's going to be, I think it does need to be reviewed, because there's going to be people that had the same questions I did, and it gives a little bit of time for clarity by waiting until the next board meeting.
Okay.
Whether it's teachers that need clarity or administrators, there's some, clarity. And so I did sit in on PECA talks but it was a very cohesive group working together, and that was great. So I know this might be a disappointment to both groups, but I think because of some of the drastic changes that have hit it gives teachers, administrators time to review it and understand it better.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we know our direction. Yes.
I just wanted to, Aaron, am I, page 22, am I right in understanding that the allowance for materials for classrooms has changed? And if that's not in place before school starts?
No,
The PECA committee agreed to raise it from 75 to 100 for that 7.5 hours of classroom setup time.
So if this isn't approved by then?
no.
Okay.
It can still be honored voluntarily.
Okay.
Thank you, Aaron. Okay, if there's no more discussion, I'd like to call for the vote.
Mrs. Black,
No.
Mr. Connor,
No.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
No.
Mr. King,
Yes?
Mr. Perez,
Yes.
Mrs. Fay Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman,
Yes.
Dr. Wingate,
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson.
Yes.
Passes.
Okay, so we will move that item to the August agenda. We will see it on the August agenda. And we will get a copy of this MOU in advance. Okay, thank you so much. All right, final voting item. I'm sorry.
So do we know how all teachers are gonna be notified? Because that's the concern, that all teachers are notified.
I mean,
That's what I heard.
communications have gone out, surveys have gone out to all teachers.
Okay.
It's not just, HCA was chosen to represent professional educators, but communication, surveys, all that has gone out to.
So this
every-
draft will go out has went out to them as well?
I can't confirm that, but they.
Yeah, that's
have
the piece I wanna know, like,
basically-
if what we're reading now, how is that gonna is that gonna go out the same way, just so
We'll
that
figure out
in
a way to
August,
get
we
input
not back
from
here?
all teachers.
Okay. Okay, no, I just wanna make sure that that it gets there, since that's what, okay.
Okay, all right. All right, final voting item, item 7F1, the ratification of early approval to purchase a chiller for East Lake Academy. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion from Mr. Smith and a second from Mrs. Black. Is there any discussion? No? Call for the vote.
Mrs. Black,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mrs. Jones. Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Perez.
Yes.
Mrs. Fay Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman.
Yes.
Dr. Wingate,
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson.
Yes. Very happy for East Lake Academy. Congratulations.
Thanks. We need air conditioning. Thank you.
Okay, that wraps it up for our voting items. In other business, we added to the agenda a discussion item from Mr. Groen, and so I'll hand it over to Mr. Groen.
I had sent an email to all the board members referencing a grading guidance document that states at the bottom was last updated October 2020. This was provided to me by Dr. Robertson. And within this document, it lists 6 strategies. It says, in addition to the options below, please review and follow HCS Board Policy 4.601. It was a baseline grade of 59. This was put in place as a response at that time to the total havoc that was taking place getting students back in school in the fall of 2020. But I want to reference Hamilton County Schools grade system policy 4.601, where the director of schools is tasked with developing an administrative procedure to establish a system of grading. And within that, it says the grading assessment system shall be uniform district-wide at comparable grade levels. The director of schools shall submit a copy reporting and assessment systems to the board before the system is implemented. These approved guidelines shall be communicated annually to students and parents. And then I want to reference State Board of Education High School Policy 2.103, which states, local boards of education shall develop credit recovery program rules, regulations, and procedures. These policies shall be formally adopted by the local board of education, posted to the district's website, and provided in writing to any participating students, parents, or legal guardians. This was not done when the grading guidance document was put in place. So this policy has been extended into the last two school years. Dr. Robinson had, in an email, told me when I asked for a copy of this report that he would get it to me within the next 2 weeks, and that was 4 weeks ago. So from what I'm seeing is what are we as a board going to do in regard to our own policy in following state policy? And I'll make one last comment. The policy that was put in place in October of 2020 says that it was updated. Well, for any document to be updated, there has to be an original document. And I've not been provided with that. I do know that in the summer of 2021, at a principals meeting, that there was a PowerPoint where on page 29 it says COVID grading opportunities, and it lists on the left-hand side the 6 procedures or strategies that would be put in place, of which a baseline grade of 59 is there. And there were 3 questions off to the side which say, given the opportunity, what would you continue? What would you stop? What would you change? To the best of my knowledge, there was no document for guidance for principals that came out of this summer meeting. So what I'm seeing is policies put in place that are not following our own policy of 4.601, nor the State Board of Education policy 2.103. So,
Ms. Robinson, Mr. Dream is going to pass you guys out a memo to address this issue. I'm not going to walk through the entirety of this memo, but I will walk through by paragraph kind of some major topics and allow you guys to read this, and I'll ask at times for Scott Bennett to weigh in. What we have here is a question of what is board responsibility in terms of developing policy and what is the administration's responsibility in terms of putting applicable procedures and administrative operations in place. First paragraph on this memo simply states what we believe. We've talked about this many times. What we believe about grades is that grades should reflect students' understanding of standards. They shouldn't reflect someone that knows how to play school. And so kids should have multiple opportunities through multiple different options to show their understanding of standards. If you go to the next paragraph, it really addresses a little bit of what Mr. Groen was saying under Board Policy 4.601. And this is where I would ask Mr. Bennett if I'm saying anything incorrectly to make sure that we're staying within the boundaries of board policy. And then we'll go to state board policy. But in this, the policy does give authority to the superintendent to create a system, right? And when we're talking about system here, I think it's important for us to consider language of state board policy, right? So when you go down to the next paragraph and look at the uniform grading system that is developed by the State Board of Education, where it talks about being uniform by grade band. In 4.601, back to our board policy, that is where it talks about kindergarten through second being a standards-based grading system, and 3 through 12 being a point system. The point system, we have to follow the uniform grading system. So if you flip to the next page, you will see the uniform grading system that's set by the State Board of Education, which we, without hesitation, follow and abide by. What the board policy nor state board policy does, it does not set things like saying there is a baseline grade. That is a procedure. That is an administrative decision. I don't want to get into those things because you guys are a policy-making board. But what I will say is in that October of 2020 memo, the bullet immediately after setting 59 as baseline grade, and to again make sure I emphasize how we're following state board policy. The reason it was a 59 then is because in October of 2020, the grade scale was at 70, right? Board policy, state board policy changed it to a 60, got moved back down to a 50, right? But so the bullet immediately after the one that mentions the baseline grade of 59 specifically states that students should be given the opportunity to earn the baseline grade, right? That is an administrative procedure. So if you go down to the bottom of that second page, talk a little bit more about how we mirror the uniform grading system of the state. But I provide you examples of where we offer individual schools and even individual teachers at times a reasonable leeway to make decisions about grading. I provided 3 examples for you there, and some of these, they may sound familiar. At times, if you ever took a test in middle school or high school where the majority of the kids missed a question, have you ever heard of a teacher throwing out that question? It's an administrative procedure, right? So the second example, I was fortunate enough to be in several classes where this helped me out a lot. That if the highest grade on a test was an 89, a teacher would curve the test.
Mm-hmm.
That's the choice of the teacher to help students' grades. Now, the third bullet gets into a little bit when we're talking about actually that baseline grade. And I'm going to speak specific here because I think it's important considering conversations that have been had outside of this body right here that we're clear that the principal at East Ridge High School had a very clear procedure in place to earn that baseline grade. He was using, and they were using, second chance contracts, and they were also using what we call grade repair, meaning at the end of the first quarter, if a student has a 30 on their final grade, what they were doing is putting in Power School a 50 and then in a comment section a 30, and that student worked on grade repair until he earned the 50, right? So I want to be clear that there's nobody that is trying to do anything that is outside the boundaries, specifically of state board policy, but more importantly, this board's policy. You flip over to the back, I'll end it with this, is that, you know, there's a time and a place to have this conversation. And these are conversations about board policy, they're conversations about administrative procedures. You know, we can get into the specifics where Scott can help us draw a very clear line. But what Hamilton County Schools has been doing for a number of years, and it has not changed. I would say it was actually in place before that October 2020 memo, is allowing our administrators and our teachers the flexibility within state board policy and within the boundaries of Hamilton County School Board policy to make decisions about grades and how to best serve kids. Going back to the belief that grades should demonstrate kids' understanding of standards, right? And so what I would recommend is that we set a board work session so that we can go into a deep dive about what we do as a school system to ensure that we're serving kids well.
Thank you for this memo, Dr. Robertson, and thank you for chiming in and helping us understand more of that process. Mrs. Jones.
So one, thank you, Dr. Robertson, for your statement. For this memo. I actually have been waiting on this because I was a bit taken aback by the July 10th. I think it was Monday, July 10th. I just trying to pull it up. But Monday, July 10th, there was an article that went out, an opinion article, and opinions are opinions. Everybody has a right to them. Just in my tenure on the board, it's often, and in my trainings through TSBA, it's often been made very clear to us as board members what our role is as a board member, where our jurisdiction upholds, where our lane is, right? And so most recently, thanks to Sherry keeping me on my toes, I just attended the Board Policy and Operations Academy in Nashville, and they talked a lot about things such as this kind of situation in which board members oftentimes get confused. I shouldn't say get confused, but oftentimes I don't know the word, but cross over into lanes or on our lanes because of our role as a board member. And from what I understand in reading your memo and reading the article and knowing what I know about board policy, this was an administrative decision, which honestly is not in our purview per se. Now, should we be notified? Yes. Moreover, though, my concern really is not to what occurred, because I was here through the whole COVID, pre-COVID and during COVID. So I've been here for a while. I am more concerned with the ethics and the morale of my board member. And I want to address Mr. Groen because I do feel kind of like if you had a concern from May, end of May, we had a meeting in June, we had a major article in July, we have a board chair, we have a board vice chair, we have a policy committee member. I mean, I felt like there were ample ways that you could have maybe had this discussion with us as your peers before doing this article. I just want to express that. Your right is your right. But I just want to say that because it was kind of like, wait, where is this coming from and what is this about? And then it's honestly just kind of been dragged along, of course, because it's an opinion article, then other people can respond to opinions, and those are fine too. I just think that when you look at board policy, ethics and duties of individual board members, and it talks about article in the one where the duties of individual board members, and it gives articles. So article 1 is my relation to the children, my relations to the community, my relations to teachers and personnel, and my relations with other board members. I draw concern to articles 2, my relation to my community, and articles 4, my relations with other board members, because granted, you may have been trying to do Article 2, Section 3, where you'll endeavor to keep the community informed about the progress and the needs of the schools, and I could see that, but I don't think you fairly and did your due diligence to educate them. That's one, that's a concern. I feel like you gave one side of the story without allowing something else to support that. You didn't fully inform them, I don't feel like. Just my opinion, just like you had an opinion. And then in Article 4, it talks about, I will make decisions only after full discussion of matters at a board meeting. And so I don't think we just never came together as a group to talk about this. Like, you didn't bring it to us as your board. You didn't take it to the chair, from my understanding. I mean, it was just kind of like it went out there, and now here we are. Now you're talking to us about it, but I feel like the community already has an opinion developed about it because it went out that way before anybody was ever able to talk about it, support it with any type of documentation, to support it with any policy, to support it with any type of board member training, to hear from the administration, to hear all that. I mean, it was kind of already just put out there, and now the story is what it is. And so I don't like, and once again, I'm respectful of the fact that you had an opinion. We try to be respectful of each other's opinions. I just think it was in bad taste. I don't know another way to say it. I just think it was in bad taste to like put it out to the world, and then now you want to come back and talk to us about it.
Mr. Keene?
I'd like to talk, I guess, about the validity of some of the practices, so, and maybe the longevity. So in 2008, I left a very enjoying and fulfilling job at Hunter Middle School as the principal to take over Hamilton County Adult High School, which actually was my project during Leadership Fellows program, which was in 1999. At that time, Dr. Scales was our superintendent, and him and I sat down when we had the meeting, and he told me that I was going to be the principal at the adult high school. And he shared some ideas about successful practices for this type of student that was coming in. And these were students that were unsuccessful at their previous schools for different reasons. The number one reason, they couldn't get to school. Attendance was probably 90% of the students' reason for not making it. Some were there because of discipline, and they had gone through Washington Alternative and then came to me after that. Some were court appointed to make sure that, you know, they had a possibility of doing something besides jail. And some were there for drug-related issues. And that was carried on from Dr. Scales to Dr. Smith to Dr. Kelly to Dr. Johnson. All four superintendents met, discussed with me, you know, what are our strategies to help successfully get students that are unsuccessful to be successful. And one of those was a policy that I held in the school for all those years, and that was no grade below a 50. And the no grade below a 50, at that time again, grade was 70 for the F. No grade below a 50, teachers, and I had great teachers there. We had 8 teachers, and in those years, 3 of those 8 teachers were elected as the Hamilton County Teacher of the Year. 2 of them in social studies, 1 in math, and one of the social studies teachers became the director of social studies. But they had compassion. And the 50 was compassion. It allowed a kid to come in where he had not been successful, and still, even though, I don't know the way to say it, they had not changed their stripes yet, they were still not quite successful. But by the time they'd been with us for a year, the second semester, they were making grades in the 70s, 80s, 90s. those students, that 50 was a saving grace for them. For some that didn't quite change, it allowed them to, in their second year, and most of the students that we had did not stay for 2 years. Most of them were one and done, or if they weren't successful, and especially if they didn't show up, I had the luxury, if they missed 9 days of school, I disenrolled them and they were done for a while. If they got into trouble, we don't use Washington School. We used the door and asked them to leave. So they had a little bit of life hitting them in the face, but if they did come back for a second year, they had the opportunity to go back through credit recovery because of the grade of a 50, still an F, but through at first, and I'm going to say a term, I know Robert was around during this, we used to use a program called Novanet that was the first online curriculum, and that was back in the early 2000s. And we eventually changed to Edgenuity, which was a much better program. And it took the students, even though, sometimes, and we made them do the online classes in class with a tutoring monitor, even during planning times and stuff. But teachers were willing to do that. And they became successful because of that. So the 50 was never looked at as a gimme. It was looked at as a little bit of compassion. So, and that's not to say myself, my school counselor, we did a lot of work. Once the teachers gave that 50, it was not their job to bring that grade up. That fell on myself as the administrator and my guidance counselor, and between the two of us, we stayed on students, making sure, that they would make those grades. I don't know, COVID brought some things we'd never faced before, but compassion again was thought of as the reason, and I think during that time some things were done out of compassion to help kids because of the amount of learning loss. Now, do we need to change that? We can have those conversations, but I am just going to let you know that there has been policy procedures, not policies, but procedures that have been around for the 17 years that I was a high school administrator. So it's not something that just came about. It's been there through, I know, 4 administrators before Dr. Robertson, and all of them aware that this was a process to help certain students to be successful.
Okay, everyone has their box lit up, and rightfully so. I'm really tempted to like terminate this conversation though, because I don't know what we're gonna accomplish here, and it's 7:22, and I'm just being real with you guys, okay? I know everyone's really passionate about this topic, and specifically about the fact that there was an article in the Chattanoogan by one of our board members, and it riled a lot of people up. I get that. But I'm just going to terminate this conversation. I don't think that it gets us anywhere. I think that if you have specific comments for Mr. Groen, I think you should talk to him about it directly. I don't think that this is the platform and where we need to have that. Dr. Robertson, your memo, thank you.
I would like to respond.
I understand. Let me finish my comments,
Yes,
please. And I'm not sure that your response is productive either. I would say talking directly to each other would be more productive. If you have something to talk about regarding the policy or the procedure, let's talk about that versus necessarily how people feel about the situation. If we want to set a date to discuss this topic, I think we do that.
I need to make a point known.
I understand.
I need to make a point known.
I understand. I just don't think it's a productive forum. Like we're not getting anywhere with policy or procedure right now. So, and as chair, I have the right to shut down a conversation. So, if we want to set a date for a work session, that's what Dr. Robertson has suggested, and I think that that's the forum where we talk more productively about the process, the procedure. We can set that. You've said that you'll do that, so I assume that you'll email us about that. Okay, Mrs. Ford, that'd be great. Okay. Mr. Groen, if there's something that we need to know in regards to the process or procedure, happy to let you make that comment.
Madam Chair, I first sent you, were copied on an email of May 18th, bringing this topic up. I never have gotten a response from any of the emails that I've sent you on this issue. But I want to make it known that I have been in conversations for weeks with Dr. Robinson. And because I didn't get answers on this, is why.
From him, correctly?
Yes.
Correct? Is that what you mean? Yeah.
So the only document I ever received was the one I shared. And I shared everything with all the school board members on Tuesday of this week. So, you know, I did contact our board chair on May 18th. Thank you.
I don't believe there was a request on May 18th to bring this before the board in that email. So I do want to point that out for the rest of the board to understand that it was not requested that I bring it before you. I think that Mr. Groen, though, as a closing statement and a closing comment in regards to your comments, I think that the issue here that we have, though, is that you took a board matter publicly instead of bringing it to the board. That's one issue. There is an ethics violation also in our ethics policy. But also, you also violated Dr. Robertson's contract by, putting in writing and putting it in a news outlet, your opinion on a matter that, frankly, is not policy. It's a matter, it's a procedural matter. And then I'm gonna be also honest, you also called out other employees, including Dr. Stewart, and she doesn't deserve that. But also, she's an employee of the system and she's not your employee. The board has one employee, and that's Dr. Robertson. And so there are a number of areas where you put this board in jeopardy by doing what you did. And I think that there are a number of people on this board that feel that way. And rather than letting us just belabor the topic, you may have sent something to us after the fact, but not before. And I think that that's another area where, if it was a real issue, you should have sent it to the entire board before and asked that it be discussed. So.
I think he did say that.
He did not. If you got something that we didn't, we'd love to know when.
No, if he sent it to the board, he just told you that he sent all the
On
information.
Tuesday.
On Tuesday, the article was last
The
week.
article went out July 10th, and it's been ongoing
Well,
ever since.
Okay, I will just say something myself. As being a board member who has taken on many superintendents for many things, not everything that I disagreed with the superintendent on was a policy matter. There were lots of procedures that I had lots of problems with, but never has anybody said they were going to get you for ethics for questioning a superintendent. I think that is just crazy. I mean, you do what you want to, but that is nuts.
Well, I don't think she said
Yeah, I
they
didn't
were
say
going to
that.
get them
You
for
know I
ethics.
didn't
She
say
just
that.
said it
Okay, all
violated.
right, we're going to dismiss. Thank you so much.
Let her choose about and not let you even retaliate. It's wrong.